Okay, so we got this episode of Coffee Talk to look at today,
Hmm.
and they called it the big three: birth, death, and you know what.
Right.
Which, come on, we all know what they mean, right? It's
Of
sex.
course. Yeah.
But the whole episode is about how these huge life events, how they kind of tie into the whole, like, origin of religion.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Like, why are these things so central to pretty much every belief system?
Exactly. And, like, it makes sense when you think about it. These are the things that every human being, like, throughout all of history, has had to deal with.
It's true.
Like birth, well, you got to come into the world somehow.
Right.
Death, we're all going to face that eventually. And, well, sex, that's how we keep the whole human race going.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, the biological stuff. That
Yeah,
these are experiences that are like deeply emotional, deeply personal, and they
definitely.
force us to ask these big questions about life and death and purpose.
I mean, have you ever, like, thought about it that way? That these things we all go through, they could actually be part of what led to, like, the whole concept of religion in the first place.
Well, Coffee Talk really focused on this idea that humans have this inherent need to understand the world around them,
Yeah.
to create meaning, especially when we're confronted with things we can't explain.
Like, I'm thinking about how in the podcast they talked about how, like, ancient Egyptians had this whole belief system built around the afterlife.
Oh, yeah, with the weighing of the heart ceremony.
Exactly. It's like
Wow.
they needed a way to make sense of death.
To provide some comfort in the face of the unknown.
And Coffee Talk actually brought up a really good point about how these beliefs, they don't just help us understand, like, they also offer guidance, right?
Totally, yeah.
So, like, with the Egyptians, if you believe your heart would be weighed against a feather,
Right.
it might, like, make you want to live a more virtuous life.
So your actions in this life have consequences for the next.
I mean, that's powerful stuff.
And, it's not just the ancient Egyptians, right? Almost every religion has some kind of framework for dealing with death, some belief about what happens after we die.
And for those other big events, too,
Exactly.
like birth and even,
Sex.
yeah.
It's interesting how they talked about how different religions approach sexuality in such diverse ways.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like some really emphasize procreation as like the primary purpose,
Hmm.
while others focus more on the spiritual aspects of intimacy.
Right, right.
And you can see how those different perspectives would shape how people view sex and relationships within those faiths.
It's really making me think about how all of this connects to, well, like, other ways we try to understand these big questions.
What do you mean?
Well, the Coffee Talk folks, they briefly mentioned that, science and philosophy also tackle these issues.
Right.
I'm thinking like existentialism, that whole thing about the meaning of existence,
Yeah, that's a good example.
or even, evolutionary biology, how it helps explain our biological origins.
But there's a difference, though, isn't there?
How so?
Well, it seems like science and philosophy, they often focus on the how. Like, how did life begin? How does the brain work? What is consciousness?
But religion is more about the why.
Exactly.
Like, why are we here? What's the purpose of it all?
And maybe is there something more beyond this physical world?
And I think that's where religion, like, steps in.
Mm-hmm.
It offers this framework, these stories, these rituals that help us, like, grapple with the big why questions.
And it gives us a sense of belonging, of connection to something larger than ourselves.
Yeah, so we've kind of seen how religion, it gives us this unique way of understanding these huge, sometimes scary parts of life.
Right. It's like it provides a lens through which we can make sense of the things that seem beyond explanation.
And it's amazing how different cultures throughout history have developed their own, like, rituals and beliefs to deal with these shared experiences.
I know. It's really fascinating to think about how these universal things, birth, death, and sex, have shaped human thought and belief systems for, well, I mean, since the beginning of humanity.
It really makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? Like, what role does this search for meaning, this need to understand these big life events, play in your own life? Something to think about, maybe.